Most people think wars are fought with bullets and bombs, but some of the most devastating battles in history weren't fought on battlefields at all. They were fought with printing presses, interest rates, and exchange rates. Wars you'll never read about in your high school history books. Wars where no armies march, yet entire nations collapse. These are currency wars. And once you start to notice them, you realize something unsettling. They've shaped the rise and fall of empires just as much as any famous general ever did. This isn't just about economics. Currency wars decide who eats and who starves, who rules and who obeys. And they're still being fought today, quietly and visibly, but with consequences that reach into every dollar sitting in your wallet. At its core, the idea of a currency war is simple. Use money as a weapon. That might mean deliberately devaluing your currency to make exports cheaper, flooding markets with cheap credit to destabilize rivals, or hoarding gold to tighten the pressure on anyone who depends on it. On the surface, it sounds like smart strategy. In reality, it's economic history's version of chemical warfare. You might hurt your enemy, but you poison yourself too. One of the first modern examples appeared during the Great Depression. After the 1929 stock market crash, economies around the world fell into chaos. Countries were desperate to sell their goods abroad just to survive. But with global demand collapsing, they turned on each other through competitive devaluation. Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931, sending the pound tumbling. The United States followed in 1933, cutting the dollar's gold content. France, Italy, Japan, everyone raced to cheapen their currency. Instead of saving the global economy, it triggered what economists later called a beggar-thy-neighbor spiral. Imports became more expensive, living standards fell, political tensions rose, and that economic pressure helped pave the road to the Second World War. But currency wars didn't begin in the 20th century. Rome was fighting its own version almost 2,000 years earlier. The backbone of the Roman economy was the silver denarius, and Rome's power depended on trust in that coin. As wars expanded and costs exploded, emperors found a tempting shortcut. Dilute the silver with cheaper metals while pretending nothing had changed. At first, the difference was barely noticeable. A little less silver here, a little more copper there. But over time, the silver content collapsed, from nearly pure silver to less than 5%. It was the ancient equivalent of running the printing press nonstop. The result was inevitable: inflation, loss of trust, and economic breakdown. By the time the barbarians reached Rome's gates, the empire had already undermined itself from within. After the Second World War, the battleground shifted again. The global financial system was rebuilt at Bretton Woods, with the U.S. dollar pegged to gold and other currencies pegged to the dollar. The goal was simple: end currency wars by fixing exchange rates. But this system created a new kind of power. Because the United States controlled the dollar, and by extension global liquidity, it could project power without firing a single shot. Countries that stepped out of line didn't face invasion. They faced financial pressure. It was quieter, cleaner, and often far more effective. But even this system had limits. By the late 1960s, the U.S. was printing more dollars than could back with gold, funding the Vietnam War and massive domestic programs. Foreign governments noticed and began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. Faced with a run on U.S. gold reserves, President Richard Nixon made a shocking decision in August 1971. He closed the gold window. Overnight, the dollar was no longer convertible into gold. Bretton Woods collapsed, and the world entered the era of floating exchange rates and modern currency wars. One of the most brutal examples came in the 1980s. Though few remember it as a war, Japan was rising fast, fueled by manufacturing exports and relentless productivity. Its trade surplus with the United States exploded. Washington wasn't happy. In 1985, the U.S., Japan, West Germany, France, and the U.K. signed the Plaza Accord, an agreement to deliberately weaken the dollar and strengthen the yen and the German mark. On paper, it was about trade balance. In reality, it was a coordinated currency strike. The yen doubled in value in just 2 years. Japanese exports became painfully expensive. Asset bubbles formed and then burst. What followed was decades of stagnation. The U.S. didn't fire a shot. It used currency markets as artillery. Currency wars rarely look like wars in real time. They look like policy debates, interest rate announcements, and international summits. But the damage is real. Factories close. Unemployment rises. Savings evaporate. The 1997 Asian financial crisis made that painfully clear. When Thailand was forced to abandon its currency peg, the baht collapsed. Panic spread to Indonesia, South Korea, and Malaysia. Currencies crashed. Economies contracted. Millions were pushed into poverty almost overnight. One country's devaluation became another country's disaster. And this isn't just history. Many economists believe we're living through Currency War 4.0 right now. The weapons have evolved. Central banks cut interest rates to zero or even below. Quantitative easing floods the system with money. Sanctions freeze assets and cut nations out of payment networks. The U.S. and China are locked in a high-stakes struggle over monetary influence. The dollar remains the world's reserve currency, but China is pushing the yuan globally, building alternative payment systems and stockpiling gold. Meanwhile, emerging economies face an impossible choice. Keep rates low and risk capital flight, or raise them and crush growth. The pandemic turned the slow-motion war into a sprint. Governments printed unprecedented amounts of money. In the U.S. alone, trillions were created in under 2 years. At first, it felt painless. Markets soared. Spending surged. But the bill always arrives. By 2022, inflation hit 40-year highs. Interest rates shot up. The dollar strengthened, and weaker economies buckled. Debt crises erupted. Currencies teetered. What stabilized one country destabilized dozens of others. That's the hidden cost of currency wars. They don't stay contained. Everyone is forced onto the battlefield. History shows these wars rarely end cleanly. They spiral until something breaks. A currency collapses. A system resets. Power shifts. The Dutch guilder gave way to the British pound. The pound yielded to the dollar. Each transition came with turmoil. Now the questions are growing louder. Will the dollar remain dominant? Will a multipolar system emerge? Will digital currencies or even decentralized crypto challenge the old order? These aren't academic debates. They shape your savings, your rent, your food, your future. The most dangerous part of currency wars is that most people don't even realize they're happening. When a bomb falls, you hear it. When a currency loses 20%, you notice it later. At the grocery store, in your bills, in your shrinking savings. By the time the headlines catch up, the damage is done. That's why financial awareness matters. If you understand the patterns, how inflation erodes wealth, how money is used as power, you can protect yourself. You can diversify. You can hold assets outside fragile systems. You can stop confusing numbers on a screen with real security. In the end, currency wars remind us of one thing. Money is never neutral. It's a weapon, and the winners are usually the most powerful, not the most productive. The losers are often those who didn't realize they were in a war until it was already over. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the playbook never changes. Different names, same moves. So the next time you hear about a currency adjustment, a rate cut, or new sanctions, don't think of it as abstract economics. Think of it as the opening move of a battle. Because in a currency war, you don't have to be a soldier to become a casualty. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers.